Imagine this. A developer ships a full macOS app,
Right.
over 20,000 lines of code.
Uh,
But here's the kicker. He personally only wrote about 1,000 lines himself.
wow. Seriously. 1,000 out of 20,000.
Yeah, seriously, this is an exaggeration. It's what a developer named Indragi actually did with his app Context.
Context. Okay.
He built this pretty sophisticated native Mac application almost entirely using Claude Code. You know, Anthropic's new AI coding
Yeah,
assistant.
good Claude Code. I've been hearing a lot about that.
And look, we're not talking about some toy app like a calculator or something simple.
Uh-huh.
Context has complex stuff. OAuth for logins, intricate Swift UI interfaces, automated build scripts, even setting up for App Store deployment.
So the whole 9 yards, basically.
Exactly. This feels like, well, a really big leap forward in software development. And it's moving fast. So welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're really plunging into Indragi's journey because, honestly, the implications go way beyond just this one app. By the end of this, you'll get a much clearer picture of how AI coding tools have, grown up from basic autocomplete.
A lot more than autocomplete.
Yeah, and the specific techniques that actually make these AI agents productive partners, why this huge shift might even mean, like, the end of the traditional IDE as we know it.
That's a big statement.
It is. And most importantly, what all these changes could mean for your understanding of how software gets made and maybe even, your career in tech.
Yeah, it's fascinating because this achievement, it doesn't just tweak how we work. It really makes you question some fundamental ideas about how software even comes into being, from that first idea to the finished product.
Okay, let's unpack that. Thinking back, remember when GitHub Copilot first landed?
Oh, yeah, that felt like magic at the time.
Totally. Type a comment, get a whole function back. It was exciting, right? A glimpse of what was coming.
For sure.
But looking back now, that was really just the opening act, the first little tremor before the real earthquake.
Exactly. The big jump now is into these agentic tools, things like Cursor, Windsurf, and of course Claude Code, which we're focusing on.
Agentic, meaning they act more independently.
Precisely. The difference is huge.
Yeah.
They're not just suggesting code snippets. They act more like autonomous AI developers.
Huh.
They can read an entire code base, go look up documentation online if they need to, compile a program, run tests.
Wait, run tests too.
Oh, yeah. Run tests, figure out why they failed, debug the failures, and then iterate on the code until it actually works. It's a whole development loop, all contained within the AI.
Okay, this is where it gets really, mind-bending for me. What Indragi did with Claude Code, he used it to replace his IDE completely.
Right. No more file trees, no syntax highlighting.
None of it. Just a text box. He described what he wanted, and the AI did the rest. I mean, when I first heard that, I was skeptical, honestly.
I get that. It sounds almost impossible.
How do you build something serious without seeing the code structure? Without that familiar environment? It feels like trying to sculpt blindfolded.
That's a really common reaction.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. The IDE has been like the developer's command center for so long. But what Indragi showed is that the AI's own internal model, its understanding of the code and the goals, becomes the IDE in a way.
Okay.
The human's job shifts. You're not directly typing code line by line anymore. You're providing super clear intent and giving feedback to the AI.
Yeah.
It's less about the visual layout and more about how precisely you communicate and how well the AI reasons internally.
That is a huge paradigm shift.
Yeah.
Fascinating. So let's get into the tech details for the Context app. He built it using Swift 6.1 and Swift UI.
Right.
And it's worth pointing out, those aren't always the most common things in AI training data, right? But Claude seemed to handle them pretty well.
It did remarkably well in some areas. It was particularly good with Swift UI, which is, not trivial given its declarative nature.
Yeah, Swift UI can be tricky.
Definitely. But it did struggle a bit with some of the newer Swift concurrency features. And sometimes it defaulted back to older Objective-C ways of doing things instead of the modern Swift APIs.
Ah, okay. So like a junior dev who maybe learned Swift a couple of years ago?
Exactly like that.
Yeah.
Very talented, very capable, but maybe needs a little guidance on the absolute latest stuff.
Gotcha.
But what was really impressive was how Claude could refactor complex Swift UI views. It broke them down into smaller, more manageable pieces on its own.
Without being told to refactor specifically.
Right. Just as part of achieving the main goal, which is super helpful for dealing with Swift's complex type errors and just keeping the code clean.
Okay, this next bit, this really changed how I think about debugging and design, actually.
Huh?
Indragi said sometimes Claude would generate a UI that just looked well, ugly.
Happens to the best of us.
Yeah. But his fix, he literally just typed, make it more beautiful.
No way.
Yes. And he said Claude actually came back with genuinely good design improvements. Think about that. It's like having an instant design partner right there.
That's incredible, like an AI aesthetic sense.
And even crazier was the visual debugging. He could take a screenshot of a UI bug, something looking wrong on the screen, paste the screenshot into Claude, and get code fixes back.
Oh, okay, that is a fundamental shift. You're not describing the bug in text, you're just showing it.
Exactly. It bypasses that whole process of digging through logs or trying to explain a visual glitch in words.
Wow. That completely redefines how a developer interacts with the product, doesn't it?
It feels like it.
It moves the developer up a level. You're less of a code mechanic, painstakingly fixing every little thing,
Right.
and more of an architect or a director. You provide the vision, the intent, the high-level feedback, even visual feedback, and the AI handles the detailed execution and troubleshooting. It frees up so much mental energy.
So if we have these powerful AI agents, what's the trick to actually using them well? You mentioned it's not just prompt engineering anymore.
Right, that's the key insight here. The new skill is really context engineering.
Context engineering. Okay, what does that mean exactly?
It's all about managing the AI's understanding of the entire project, the whole picture.
Why is that so critical?
Well, it comes down to a basic limitation of these models. They have finite context windows. Claude's latest is big, like 200,000 tokens, but it's still limited.
Tokens meaning like words or pieces of code?
Sort of, yeah, pieces of text. Everything you feed it, documentation, your code, your instructions, its own output, it all uses up tokens in that window.
And if you hit the limit?
Performance starts to degrade. It can lose track of things. Its reasoning gets less coherent across the whole problem. So strategically managing what's in that context window at any given time is crucial for getting good results. You have to feed it the right information.
Okay, that makes sense. And Indragi figured out some specific ways to do this.
Yeah, he highlighted 4 key techniques that really worked for him on context. First was priming the agent, meaning don't just jump in asking for code. First, have Claude read all the relevant stuff docs, existing code, design specs, whatever applies.
So give it background first.
Exactly. He even had it summarize what it learned just to make sure it understood before asking you to write anything new, like prepping a team member before they start a task.
Smart. Okay, what's second?
Detailed specifications.
Yeah.
This seems obvious, but it's vital. You can't just say, build me Instagram.
Right, need more detail.
A lot more. He wrote out really detailed descriptions of exactly what he wanted each feature to do. Not perfect English necessarily, but unambiguous step-by-step requirements. The clearer the input, the better the output. Just like working with a person, really.
Makes total sense. Number 3.
This one is wild. Ultra think and make a plan.
Ultra think, like a key word.
Apparently, yes. Ultra think is a specific word that tells Claude to go into a deeper, more extended thinking mode. It uses more tokens, so it technically costs more compute time and money, but it consistently produced significantly better, more well-thought-out results. Plans, code, everything.
Think about that. We're not just giving commands, we're managing the AI's thinking process, telling it how hard to think about something.
Exactly. It's a totally different kind of interaction than traditional programming.
Yeah.
You're guiding its problem-solving approach.
Wow. Okay, and the 4th technique?
This might be the most powerful one. Setting up robust feedback loops.
Feedback loops, meaning?
He set it up so Claude could build, test, and debug its own code independently.
How?
Using tools like Xcode Build MCP, that's a command line tool for Xcode projects. Claude could basically tell the command line, compile this code, then run the tests. If tests failed, Claude would read the error messages, figure out what went wrong, modify the code, and try again, all on its own.
Without him intervening.
Without direct human intervention in that loop. Compile, test, identify failure, debug, repeat. Well, you could call it scary good or exciting good, depending on how you look at it. An autonomous self-correction cycle. And these strategies, these 4 techniques, they're not just nice-to-haves. They're absolutely essential if you want to interact effectively with these advanced AI agents.
Right.
They turn the AI from just a code generator into a real partner. A partner that can generate code, sure, but also problem solve and refine things on its own within the boundaries you said. It's moving from just using a tool to actual collaboration.
And it wasn't just the app's core logic, right? You mentioned Claude helped with the whole development lifecycle.
That's the really transformative part, yeah. It wasn't just writing Swift UI views.
So what else?
For instance, Claude built the entire release automation system for context.
The whole system.
Yep, around 2,000 lines of Python code, all generated by the AI. It handled things like code signing, notarizing the app with Apple, packaging it for the App Store, automatically generating change logs.
Wow, all that tedious stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Uploading debug symbols for crash reporting, and even little polished things like Indragi wanted the command line tools to look nicer, so he just asked Claude to beautify the CLI, and it did.
Yeah.
Professional-looking terminal output.
Okay, that's huge. Think about that tedious 20% of software development.
The stuff that isn't the fun creative part.
Right. The automation, the tooling setup, chasing down weird build errors. That's where so many side projects just fizzle out, where indie devs get stuck.
Absolutely.
And now you're saying with AI, that 20% becomes almost free.
Essentially, yeah. Or at least dramatically cheaper and faster.
So what does that mean for everything? If shipping polished software suddenly gets way easier, what happens next?
Well, you could see an explosion of new software. Niche tools that weren't viable before, hyper-personalized apps, startups getting complex ideas out the door incredibly quickly.
The barrier to entry just drops.
Dramatically. And the definition of what a developer is, that's definitely changing. And Draghi made a pretty bold prediction, but it feels more plausible every day. He thinks future IDEs won't look like today's text editors.
What will they look like?
Instead of focusing on file trees and code highlighting, their main job will be helping developers prime the AI context and set up those feedback loops we talked about.
So the tools themselves become AI-centric.
Exactly. He basically said it could be the end of the text editor as the centerpiece of software development.
Wow. That's a big thought. But you know, the most inspiring part of Indragi's story, for me, personally, was him saying he felt like he gained an extra 5 hours every day for about $200 a month for the AI usage.
That's a significant productivity boost.
It's huge. And because it removed so much of the tedious friction, he was able to actually ship polished side projects again. He said he hadn't been able to do that for 6 years.
Wow.
That's more than just productivity, right? That's like creative freedom being handed back to people, bringing ideas back to life.
That's a great way to put it. Restored creative freedom.
So, okay, let's recap this deep dive. We've seen how crucial context engineering is. Now it's the new key skill.
Absolutely. Managing the AI's understanding.
And the need for really detailed instructions, detailed specifications, plus setting up those automated feedback loops so the AI can build, test, debug itself.
Critical for making it a real partner.
And this vision of the future, where our tools are built around interacting with AI first, completely changing how we build software.
Yeah, it's a fundamental shift.
So thinking about all this,
it really brings up a powerful question for you, the listener, to think about. If the cost, the effort, the sheer time it takes to bring a really polished software idea into the world drops this dramatically, what projects that seemed impossible before, or that you put on the shelf years ago, will you now dare to actually explore?
That's a great question. Yeah, we really encourage you to think about that. Are you ready to start experimenting with these tools? What are your biggest curiosities or maybe your biggest worries about this shift? Or just, what new ideas pop into your head knowing that the final slog of shipping might become almost effortless? What stood out to you from this deep dive today? And what new questions is it sparking for you?